You have been waiting for this moment all week, haven't you? To come to church and worship together and experience Sabbath, haven't you? Oh, it's something that when you meet people and they don't get this and you explain it to them, they think you're on drugs. But they just don't get it. When you explain how good Sabbath is, oh, it's so good. I've been waiting all week to talk with you and worship with you. It's the highlight of my week. Welcome. Welcome to OC Grace First Service, where we want to be an authentic expression of the kingdom of heaven. Ooh, that's good. We want to be that authentic expression. If you're new, if you're a visitor, we hope you felt welcomed. Hope you got a gift bag. Like 100 people invited you to their homes. That happened, right? Good. Good. We're working on it. We've been moving through Genesis, and we're learning that these Babylonian captives, these Hebrews, they're asking, where is God in all the chaos? They're compiling their stories, and they're looking for meaning from all of this. That God is a God that brings order and life into our chaos. And so today, I want to move through some interesting things. But before we do, I have one thing I want to make real quick, make real obvious. In your bulletins, you saw this communication card? Everyone has one. Here's what we need. Even if you're a member, if you've been here 1 billion times, I don't know if that's possible. You've been here many times. Fill this out. We want to know who OC Grace First Service is, and we want to be able to know where you want to fit in, if you want to fit in. We're not going to fill your inbox with junk mail, we promise. Please fill this out. Let us know who you are, where you want to be involved, if you want to be involved, what your interests are. We need everyone today to fill it out. Put it in the offering plate or put it in the red basket in the back. Please fill these out. Everyone, please. I got through that. Let me pray with you. God, thank you for your love. Thank you for your compassion, your mercy. Thank you that your message continues to save us every single day. Thank you for new life. Amen. My in-laws are here this week. And I love saying that because most people are like, oh no, mine were here a couple months ago. I was driving to the airport 8 hours ahead of time. I kept telling them, no, it was a very busy airport. You know, you're driving to John Wayne. I love my in-laws. I really do. And I was talking with my father-in-law, Dan, this week. And it was just, I love this man. I do. I love this man. And he's telling me about, and Dan, if I blow this story, if I don't tell it quite right, it's all because it's embellishment, and that's what speakers do. No, I'm doing my best to recount it. So he lived in Europe for a very long time. He's experienced all this, just like a crazy, amazing life. And he was telling me about what it was like to live in this village there in Europe and how they had very little. But to him back then, it felt like they had a lot because guess what? They had an outhouse. Yeah, living large. An outhouse. They had a wood stove. They had all these things. But he said, what's been interesting, I kept asking him questions. I found the whole conversation just really electric. And I kept asking these questions. And he said, you know what's sad is that, and we kept talking about generations things. He said, your generation and your kids' generation, sometimes we can't enjoy the abundance that we have like I can. And that wasn't like oh, look at me. It's sad. Because we have this abundance. We have Costco. Right? And during this time in his life, he would go to the supermarket and they would buy eggs, but they would buy them individually. We're like, 100, that seems reasonable. 100, I'll take buckets of eggs. And before you know it, you're handing eggs out to neighbors because you're afraid they're going to go bad. Eggs, free eggs. Abundance. And so he said it's sad because a lot of times we don't know how to appreciate what we have because many of us, we've never actually been in a place of need. We have this excess, this abundance. And what I started to notice is the Israelites, what they're doing is they are recounting their story because they feel a need for the future generations to understand and appreciate the journey, where they've been and where they're going so that they might not make the same mistakes. Make sense? Yeah. Watch this. One of my favorite writers, I looked up a bunch of different places and I actually found this in one of my books. really cool. The stages of empire, the Israelites were looking at their stories. They were seeing where things kind of went wrong. And here's some of the different stages, and I'll go real quick with you. Basically, an empire starts with they're in bondage, they're in slavery. And what happens is they begin to have an awareness that we were not made to be slaves. That's not what we're created to be. And so they move from slavery into awareness that there's something better. And they move into this spiritual faith, the belief that there's a promise, there's something better just around the corner. And from spiritual faith, they move to great courage, because what happens when one voice cries out and another voice and another voice, you begin to realize you're not singing this song alone. It becomes a larger song, and it gains more power and more momentum. And the song begins to cause you to march into liberation. Now, some empires, they choose to do this very violently. Others choose to do this with peaceful resistance, protests. Either way, you experience liberty. But what always happens is this, and this happens over and over again with Israel. They experience abundance. They experience Costco. And it's good. But what happens when you begin to get used to Costco and you begin to think this is all there is, Costco? Well, you begin to become complacent. And you forget that there are other people in the world, and this is normal. And you begin to expect things. My daughter, every time we go into Walmart, terrible place. Every time we go there, my daughter, I gave her one toy once. I blew it once. She said, "Can I have this?" "Sure, sweetie." And now every time I go in, guess what she's like? "Well, you did it last time." "Oh, I did it last time. Why did I do it last time?" And so we're in this ugly cycle, and there's breakdowns in the middle of Walmart, and we scream and we cry. I scream, I cry. And that's our experience. You become complacent. And then after a while, you have so much abundance, you begin to be apathetic toward everyone else. You're only focused on you, me. And the poor and the hungry and the people with needs who don't have abundance, we care less and less about. And then what happens is we begin to worry that, oh no, this thing that I have, all this abundance, what if it's gone? What if I lose it? I need 5 vehicles. The rest of the world has, I need 5. And so we try to protect what we have. And before you know it, we start looking more and more like Egypt and more like Babylon. And when that begins to happen, our systems that we thought were keeping us safe, they actually fail us, and we go right back to slavery. And this is what's happening with Israel, and they're recounting their story. They're saying, what happens when we have abundance? We keep choosing the wrong direction. Lord, help us choose to walk with you in wisdom and guidance when we have abundance. Help us not to choose the wrong direction again. May our generations get this. And so the story that we're going to look at today is this story. It's the story over and over and over again in Genesis. They want to show you where they keep going wrong and where things need to go. And so we have Abraham and Lot. This was taken on the iPhone back then. It was very, very exciting, that technology. It's been around a long time. So we have a picture of Abraham and Lot. And what happened is these two tribes, they started to experience abundance. And what happened is one tribe started to use it this way, and the other tribe started to use it this way. And there began to break out fights and arguments, we're told. This land, and again, these are tribal people, right? We've evolved. They were actually arguing over like superfluous things like land, like going to war over those things. I digress. They're arguing, conflicts. And so Abraham turns to Lot and he says, Lot, we gotta separate. If you go right, I'll go left. You go south, I'll go north. And so they decide to go separate directions because the way they were using abundance was different. And so watch this. Abraham chooses to go toward the land of Canaan. Now, if you are a Babylonian captive, you are in the middle of exile. When you hear Canaan, that's the promised land. For us today, we think, oh, Canaan, it's, family trip next year. Canaan, the promised land. Eden, all things that would pop into your mind. The direction we should have gone. the thing that we're waiting for. Abraham chooses to use his abundance by walking with God in the garden, using all of that abundance in a direction that brings life. Watch what Lot does. Lot looked around and saw that the whole plain of the Jordan toward Zoar was well watered. Watch this, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of what? Egypt. I hope you see this. Lot begins to look at Egypt, and he begins to think, that's the direct, it's so bright, it's so shiny, it's so powerful. That's where I want to choose to lead my people. And how many times did Israel begin to look like Egypt? And how long was it until their city, their way of life was destroyed? Not that long. Lot chooses to go the wrong direction. He ends up going toward Egypt. Any of you ever do this? You used to do this thing, and you thought it brought you happiness until all of a sudden you realized it actually was causing you a lot of pain. That addiction or that relationship or that thing you kept going back to, and you're like, it's going to get better soon. I'll be stronger next time. And you go back to it. And what you realize is you get back into that cycle and you realize, I don't know how to get out. Lot goes back to that thing. He goes back to Egypt. And he's going to get the same result. He actually won't fit in. Lot goes back to Egypt. These two cities that they have there, vastly different. What they do with abundance. Here's how I look at it. Vegas. In Vegas, all of your dreams come true. I've never been there. I've been told that. Some of you, I think, need to dream bigger. But in Vegas, what I've been told is that it's all very self-centered, all about entertainment, all about me, 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 me. And the abundance, the extravagance is all there. There's no reason you should go to a buffet and eat 20 pounds of whatever. It's ridiculous. But it's $5. Well, okay, you're right. It's $5. Abundance. But they take all that abundance and all that potential and that power and they steer it toward things that are broken. And Sodom and Gomorrah began to get the reputation that whenever people came into the city, they would use all that power and potential and they would actually use it to harm people. Do you guys see it? Hospitality, how you welcome people is very important in that culture. And so what you did for the widow and the orphan and the stranger within your gates was a direct understanding, a relation to how you viewed God and yourself. We're powerful. It's all about us. That's how our gods are. Then there's Madison, Wisconsin. I've actually never been there either, John. Wisconsin. But I've been told it's like a very welcoming place. Every time you look this up online, it's one of the most welcoming people ever. I guess it's like Pleasantville. Maybe you walk out your door and people are like, hey, neighbor! Hi, good to see you. Milk cartons at your front door, everybody's name. I don't know. Sounds wonderful. I think it's cold, though. Welcome. In this tribal place at this time period with these purple people, what was happening here is that they viewed the welcome, what you do with power, and how you treat other people and other nations, and the widow and the orphan and the stranger, they viewed this as a spiritual thing. And so watch this. Deep within every civilization, there are stories about the gods coming down and walking among their people as strangers. And they would walk among their people, and when you invited a god to your home, and you treated them well, guess what almost always came with it? A blessing, a gift, something. Guess what happened when you treated this unexpected visitor? And again, almost every single culture, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, all had stories like this, the Greeks, the Romans. What happened when you mistreated this stranger within your gates? Curses. Stories of Zeus throwing down lightning bolts, fires burning everything up. These are the stories. And so these people, they understood you needed to treat visitors, guests, strangers, widows well. It was a reflection of how you viewed the gods. My friend Mike, he went to the Middle East, and every time I hear about the Middle East, I'm terrified, right? We've been fed this by the media, this just constant diet of fear. I found it really beautiful. He said this. He said, I thought being an American, we wrote the book on hospitality, right? I was wrong. I could never consider inviting a stranger or a foreigner to stay in my home, well, because I don't know them, right? But he said, he gave these stories. He said, we met a guy in Petra. He drove us to a food shop. He left us in the car running with AC, ran across the street, ordered us lunch, got us beverages, and refused any payment. When's the last time anyone did that to you? There's more. He said, as he's in the marketplace, he would just show people money. I don't know how much. Here, how much do I give you? I think it's all of it. No, for them, he said they would take the smallest bill he had. Interesting. He said he met this person once, just met them. They invited him to their house. Just met them seconds ago, invited them to their house, gave him tons of food, just treated him like royalty, just met him. When you go to the Middle East, there are still remnants of that today. Treating people well, the stranger within your gate. We could learn a lot from this. So Sodom and Gomorrah has this reputation of mistreating, misusing their power and their abundance and hurting the stranger within their gates. So watch this now. What happens here is that they're going to show you, and they're going to tease this idea out. They're going to show how Abraham's group welcomes and then how Lot's group welcomes. So watch this now. Abraham meets three strangers. Go back. Abraham meets three strangers. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my lords, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat so you can be refreshed and then go on your way. Think about this. When we have visitors at church, this is the best we do. Happy Sabbath, brother. And we go to our comfortable seat. When's the last time you're like, what do you need? You're new here. What do you need? Do you want to go out to eat? Can I take you to my home? Can I wash your feet? Why? You're right. That's kind of weird now in our culture. When's the last time we showed this kind of hospitality? Abraham's group, they know what to do with their abundance. They share it. They invite the stranger and the widow and the orphan in their homes. Lot is this person who has gone to Egypt. He's gone to Sodom and Gomorrah. He's gone into exile, and he's realizing he doesn't fit. The three strangers tell Abraham, look, Sodom and Gomorrah is evil. What they are doing with all that power and that potential, that abundance, is just ruining things. And this tribal understanding of the gods, of course, is this. There will be a curse. And what's the curse? There's going to be fire. And whether you believe this is literal or symbolic, don't miss the meaning here. These people have gone the wrong direction. And so here's what happens. The other gods and these other civilizations, what would have happened quickly is this. You did something wrong, what happens? Thunder, lightning, right? Immediate. This is a God that is approachable. And he listens to his creations. And he says, you're good and you're worth restoring, even if there's only 10, 3, 4. I'll send the boat. This is a huge jump. It's a huge leap for these people. It's a huge leap. From our minds today, we're like, but there's still fire. Don't miss the meaning here. God was causing these people to see him in a new light, and they're moving on a trajectory. And guess who is at the end of this trajectory? Jesus. So good. So good. That's what God looks like. So good. And so, Lot, he meets these people. My lords, he said, again, he's on the outskirts of town. He doesn't fit in. Some of you have been trying to make exile work, and you're exhausted. You keep going into captivity, you keep repeating these cycles, and you're exhausted. And what you find is you keep ending up on the outskirts. But you keep trying to fit in. If you would just turn and leave. He stays, and he welcomes them, though. My lords, please turn aside your servant's house. You can wash your feet, spend the night, and then watch this. And then go early in the morning. Think about that if you ever invited someone over. You can come to my house, you can eat, but you have to leave at like 3 in the morning. You just got to go. Yeah, you got to leave. You got to leave this place. It's not safe. And so, Lot invites them in. And what we have next, it's interesting. What happens next is that Lot welcomes these people into his home. And in verses 4 through 5, we get this really kind of grotesque story. Because what happens is these men come to the door and they start screaming, "Send us out, these strangers. Give them to us, so that we might use our power and show these people who we are. We don't take strangers in. That's not who we are. That's not how we use our abundance. We are powerful." And they'll use that power to marginalize and hurt people violently. That's what Sodom and Gomorrah does. They wanted to hurt these strangers. Now, I want to say something. Oftentimes, people use this as a way to say, well, see what happens with homosexuals. See? Sodom and Gomorrah. But let me just make a very simple statement here with you. This specific telling in this specific place, it's not about men who are like, hey, I'd like to know you over coffee so that someday we might start a family and wear Christmas sweaters together and have a cute little puppy. No, that's not what's going on here. What's going on is these men want to show dominance and brutally oppress and hurt other people with the abundance and the power that they have.
Preach, Pastor.
You get that?
Yeah.
They want to misuse their power and hurt someone. That's what Sodom and Gomorrah does. This is not about homosexuality. It's a bigger issue. It's a systemic one. What do we do with our abundance and our power? Please quit misusing this story. And so they misuse it. And here's something else that just, on the felt board, man, does it seem weird as a child. My parents would try to kind of move through this, and some of us smart booties, we'd be like, but Mom, what about this? And, well, we're going to move on to... Because what happens next is Lot says, well, don't do this evil thing. Do this evil thing. Here are my daughters. As a child, I remember thinking, what? Talk about Father of the Year. How do you explain that one away? God is good. But here's a righteous man who he's saving, who's acting righteously, but he's sending his daughters out to that? How do you explain that one away? I've heard some weird explanations. Weird ones. Here's what's happening. In this culture, women were viewed differently than they are today. I'm sorry. It's hard to swallow. It's hard to take. But here's what's happening. Women were commodities. Women were commodities in this tribal place. And if you were told, if you had the decision to send your son or your daughter, who are you sending? Your daughter. Because they're replaceable in that culture. And I know from a modern perspective, we're like, that is wrong. Well, yep, we understand that today. That's wrong. We have a woman next week being ordained. Praise the Lord. We are on a trajectory. They were here. They were moving away from those systems, but they weren't perfect. They didn't have it down yet. But they were moving in a direction away from certain things. And so understand, for them, the Hebrews reading this, they said, What a beautiful thing that they would not send the strangers out. Because here's a group of people who take seriously, they understand that we love, we take care of the poor, of the stranger within our gates. That was the message, and I get it. That's really difficult to explain until you look at it from the right lens. And if you'd like to dig deeper into that, see me afterwards. We have Sabbath school study. Let me keep going. Lot and his family, they have a mass, they leave, they have this exodus. And isn't it interesting, in chapter 16, it says that Lot and his family, they have unleavened bread. Where did that come from? Well, that doesn't come up until Exodus. Oh, because they're inserting elements to help you understand something. They're about to experience an exodus away from Egypt, Babylon, Sodom and Gomorrah. They're about to experience freedom. And so, Lot and his family, they leave. But on the way out, Lot's wife does this. And the pillar of salt, in my mind, it stays there for a second, then the wind blows, and it's gone. I always used to be confused by this as a child. It's like, if there's a big fire, if there are fireworks, I'm looking. Would God have smited me? Because I kind of wanted to see the fire. I would have been interested. Is this how God acts arbitrarily? Well, you didn't do this simple thing. I'm going to, you're salt. You're on a table. You're seasoning. There's a beautiful, deep meaning here that we miss. Salt. When an army would go into another nation, and they would fight with them, they would battle with them, they would defeat them, and they didn't want to settle that area, what they would do is this. They'd take salt, and they'd throw it all over the fields. And what would happen is that land, those fields, were no longer able to produce food. They were wasted. And this is what Rome did as well. They would leave, we're told, deserts. And so think about this for a minute. She looks back. And by the way, looking back is much bigger than just, the fireworks again. It was this. The word means this. Walking, turning, moving, your values, everything are beginning to move back toward exile. And if you are a Babylonian captive, you're understanding that there are times when we are tempted to turn and go back into exile. And that land is no longer fertile. And when you go back there, nothing grows. You experience death. And so when we are leaving exile, when it's time to step into new awareness of God, step away from the cycles of addiction, dysfunction, brokenness, we're often tempted to look back and think, maybe it wasn't that bad. We start asking really painfully bad questions. Like, what if I had done this instead of that? Maybe then it would have worked. What if I stayed a little bit longer in this abusive conversation, or this abusive relationship, or this abusive job? Maybe it could have worked out. If you're like me, you have these conversations with yourself, arguments from 10 years ago, and you're having them now. Well, if he says this, I would have said this, and I would have got him. Spending too much time in our past, in exile, can sometimes cause us to fail to be present in our exodus. There's this beautiful poem. It's called "The Road Not Taken." Not the road less traveled. The road less traveled gives you this idea of like some iconic, like, yay me, I found the road less traveled. No, I've got my own journey. It's good. That's Hallmark. But that's not Robert Frost. Robert Frost says the emphasis of my story right now, this piece of literature I'm sharing with you, is that I'm considering what would have happened if I had taken that road instead of this one. And so what is happening with Frost is that Frost says, as I've been walking, I did this. I was walking on this journey. I was exiting some of these things that were happening, and I did this. I started asking questions. What if you know what, maybe it wasn't that bad. What if I had chosen that way instead? And what Frost says is, I'll be saying this with a sigh. Because he gets to the place where he realizes all of our roads are getting shorter the longer we wait. We only have so many steps, so many breaths to breathe. And when we get stuck in this place and we start looking back at exile, thinking maybe if I'd done this or done that or whatever, if I'd second guessed this thing or this trend, maybe it would have worked. Frost says, no, I need to celebrate the road that I chose. I need to celebrate the place that God has led me to. I need to learn to celebrate that. Because what is behind me, it's my story, and I can share it because my story now is a different story because it's one of victory. But when I go back to my story, when I live exile all over again, I am no longer living in the present. I'm no longer moving forward. I am going back. Some of us need to leave that city behind. Some of us need to remember we have been given resurrection. We've been given new life through the teachings of Jesus Christ. And they're beautiful. And they're meant to be lived out right here and right now. You've been given a promise of a better life. You have a beautiful story to tell because you've been given a new life. That place you keep going back to, the shame, the guilt, it's hurting you and it's hurting your story. It's hurting your forward motion. It's hurting your journey and causing painful thorns to grow all over its path. So today, leave that city. Don't keep going back to brokenness and guilt and shame. Your story now is different. Your story, it's one of exodus from an exile. And you are experiencing freedom now in Christ. Celebrate it. And when you tell your story, let it be one of celebration rather than regret. You don't have to live in that city any longer. You don't have to live in that city any